I have a couple of questions for you guys momentarily. Our next panel here is ready to begin, Pumping Up E-Learning Strategies, and this will be presented by our senior writer for Education Week Digital Directions, Michelle Davis. Everyone, Michelle Davis.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Good. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to following up on some of the comments that Greg Gunn made, and we have three great panelists here who can tell us what's going on in their state or their district. But I want to just start by kind of giving an overview of where I see some things going on. E-learning is one of the fastest growing trends in K-12 education. It's bringing courses to students who otherwise would not have access to them. It's offering students who've been unsuccessful in a traditional class an alternative option for credit recovery. And it's bringing 21st century skills, the new buzzword that everyone is talking about, to students who already use technology in an integrated way outside the classroom in their daily lives. But what does e-learning look like? That can be a hard one to pin down. It can look like a one-to-one laptop program where students each have their own machine that they bring home every night instead of a bag of textbooks. Or it can look like a virtual school that creates online courses aligned to state standards and incorporates certified online teachers. But it can also look a lot like a traditional classroom, but one in which a teacher engages students on a daily basis in a meaningful way through technology. That might mean using online courses and material to differentiate learning to each student, or using educational computer games, a digital whiteboard, or any of a long list of educational resources available for free or for a fee on the internet. But anyone who's spent any time looking at e-learning knows that not all of it is created equal. And not all of it does what educators want it to do, which is, of course, to boost student achievement. I think most of us know by now that there's way more to creating an online course, for example, than just putting a standard textbook online. And there are also a lot of challenges to finding the best ways to train schools and teachers to incorporate these online courses and digital tools into their daily practice. There are also challenges in finding resources to put these e-learning strategies into place and organizational hurdles to incorporating them in a more traditional brick-and-mortar setting. And topping it all off is the need to constantly be reevaluating any e-learning program. The digital world is changing so quickly these days that anyone considering the adoption of such a program has to realize it will be an ongoing evolution. As new products like the iPad, for example, that no one even thought of using a couple years ago, are invented and new strategies come about. I'm really excited today to have our three guests here to talk to you about the ways they've made e-learning work in their school districts or in their states. And the three of them have a wealth of information to share with you about how to make e-learning successful in your district or your state. So I would like to welcome Lee Nunnery from the School District of Philadelphia, who we met earlier. We've got Mark Edwards, the superintendent of the Mooresville Graded School District, which has a one-to-one laptop initiative. And Cindy Hamblin, the director of the Illinois Virtual School, or IVS, which currently serves 195 public and private schools in the state. So I want to start with Lee, since we're in your home city.
Right.
And I recently learned that you guys got a big Gates grant. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about how that's going to change or how you're going to use that to incorporate e-learning into the city schools.
Well, thanks, Michelle. So we're, as you led in, we're already on the way. We have foundational technology in our schools. Buildings are wired and or wireless, but we still have a long way to go. There's kind of a last mile issue there, and what we're hoping to do is use the Gates Foundation, this proficiency-based pathways program, to not only work with teachers particularly and make sure that their digital modules are created. We want to extend learning times, and it's critical now because of the budget crunch that we have that paying that extracurricular rate isn't quite as easy as it was, so you've got to use technology to bridge that gap. We think there's a lot more collaboration that can happen in a district as large as ours, and when you look at the expanse of the city, It's hard to bring everybody together, so use the technology as the way, the platform for them to put together their ideas and to work together. But also the embedded assessment. I think that's really even more critical. We've been successful in having 9 straight years of making progress here in the city, but we still have some significant gaps. African American and Latino males do not graduate largely on time. We've got kids in underfunded schools and buildings that are old. And so we think that by threading together and using the Gates money, it'll help us think differently about how we deliver education at the end.
Can you just elaborate about embedding those assessments? I think that's something that a lot of school districts out there would like to do, and I think people sometimes struggle as to how to make it work and also how to gather knowledge from that can help inform what they're doing.
Well, and I think it's a challenge because it depends on what assessment means, right? I think it's interesting that the challenge for us, and especially in a district with about almost 1/4 of our kids, all school-age kids in charter schools that seem to offer an alternative, that they want to provide something different or better. That means they can say, look, we'll make sure your child has the individualized attention and the assessment that he or she needs. And I think what we're looking at is a way to not just make assessment a periodic event, but rather an ongoing way to measure how a child is progressing, address the needs right away, and on a regular basis come together in small learning communities and find a way to individualize the attention. And that's one way. That plus a learning management system that we hope to acquire will help us, scaffold this whole thing. And I think we're on our way. I mean, we've got some obstacles to overcome, but I think we can do that. I think we've got the right framework for it.
Great. Well, Lee mentioned earlier the whole issue of budget cuts, which I'm sure all of you out there have had to deal with. And I know a lot of people take a look at some of these really innovative programs and they say, well, that sounds great, but how can I do that in my district? We have no money. We're cutting our budget. So, Mark, you have a one-to-one laptop initiative in your district, and I think you said it goes all the way to 3rd grade, so it's high school through 3rd grade. They all have their own individual laptops. Tell us a little bit about how you found the money to do that and how you're paying for it as it goes along.
Sure, and I thank you, Michelle, and I certainly want to thank Ed Week for the opportunity to be here today. And what a great-looking audience.
They do look pretty good.
Let's get a little vitality here, all right? We rank 99th in the state in funding out of 115 districts. Wow. And so we're at the very bottom end in terms of funding. And we've used a pretty simple formula. We equate it to $1 to $1.25 per day per student. That funds hardware, software, and professional development. We look at infrastructure like parking lots and plumbing. That's something you have to have, and it should be aligned with operational funding. But we've done it in a way of repurposing funding. We've obviously stopped buying some things that we used to buy. We've moved to about 90 to 95% online content. So
no textbooks.
We have very few textbooks. Probably the only textbooks that we've bought in the last couple of years have been AP textbooks. And so we've really moved away from using traditional bound materials and have gone to online content. And again, we've suffered budget cuts for 3 years in a row, significant budget cuts, but we've made this commitment. It's part of the educational infrastructure of what we do, and then we've had some great results with it. So I think it's absolutely doable. We've had several hundred districts visit us the last few years. We share our financial model with them. It's not complicated. We don't have a lot of resources, but we have focused that resource investment and have seen a return on it by student, by school, and by district.
So it can be done. Cindy, let me ask you, you have a bit of a different situation than these two gentlemen up here with the virtual school. Sort of describe how it works, and also describe how and why brick and mortar school districts come to you and why they use your courses.
And again, thank you, Michelle, and it's great to be here and really with a different perspective from a statewide virtual school program. How our program works, we are a supplement program, which means that we provide the content, the curriculum, in our state, the certified teacher, and the delivery system and student information system for the course. In turn, we ask that partner school to credit the student upon completion of that course. I think being a supplement program, how we work in our state, and Illinois is a state with a number of districts. We have over 800 public districts in our state, from Chicago Public Schools, on one of the third largest, I think, in the country, to some very, very small ones. So really our niche in working with these districts is to supplement, to work with those student populations that need an AP course, that need a certain German or world language course not offered at their school, or credit recovery options. Michelle mentioned we have about 195, 200 public districts that we work with right now. Our enrollment's 3,000. So if you look at that, we get a handful of students from every district. Looking forward, I think we are seeing in our state a real growth in district-led online programs and blended learning opportunities. And we're really looking at how we might recreate ourselves to better support those new initiatives in our districts.
And let me just ask a follow-up. How do the districts that want to use your courses, how much do they cost? How do they pay for them?
Our courses are 17 weeks. We have a flexible enrollment, so students have the opportunity to really jump into the course 14 different times in the year. The cost is $250, but the large majority of that cost does go to pay the teacher for facilitating that course.
And do students generally take these courses during their school day, or are they taking them at home in the evening? How does it generally work?
It's a combination of both. I'd say our most successful programs are those that there is time carved out in the student's day for them to be at school and have some mentor or learning coach there to make sure they're working forward and staying productive. But we do have a number that are also taking it outside the school. Time management, having the kids learn to manage that time, be self-directed learners, is still a new skill many students don't really have yet.
Right. Well, now I want to ask all of you a question out there. I want you to take out your Active Expressions remote and make sure it's turned on and all of that. We're going to do a little poll here. We would like to ask you if your district gives high school students the option of taking an online-only course for credit. And I'll be interested to see the results. So press A if the answer is yes, B if the answer is no, and C if your district's considering that or your school is considering working on such a plan. All right, we're not going to go on too long because I figure you guys can push the button pretty quickly. So if you haven't pushed it yet, go ahead and we're going to see the results here. Or maybe not. Oh, there we go. So the majority of you said yes. Are you surprised by that, all of you?
No, I'm certainly not surprised, and I think that as we see content, the evolution of course delivery, content delivery, resource utilization, it makes sense. And I think we'll see a continuous change in terms of the evolution of how courses are delivered and the connectivity between students in regions, states, countries. I know our students certainly get a big charge out of the connectivity with students from other places. We were just connecting in one of our fourth grade classes with students in Illinois, and our students were studying Illinois, they were studying North Carolina, we were using some Skyping and other connectivity, but that type of connectivity and opportunity to expand the classroom, melt the walls, has huge potential.
It's interesting for me because I think I did one of these programs about 2 years ago and I asked a very similar question and the results were completely different. Almost everyone said no. So this is pretty interesting to see.
I would add to that, I think what we find in Illinois, many districts have the ability to allow the online courses, but there's a limit. Usually there's 1 or 2 courses in a student's career that they're able to do, so that there is a limitation within that approving that they can.
Yeah, Michelle, I think part of the issue too is competition. I mean, I come from the private sector into this work, so I'm more used to trying to gain market share and not lose it. And I think for public enterprises like school districts, we have to start thinking about it in this way. We've got a product, we've got services. There are going to be other folks, if it's charter schools, for-profit, online schools, virtuals, that are going to come into this space. And it makes sense for them because this is a stream of revenue that they can take advantage of. So we've got to innovate and make sure that we're at least competitive, but also start to collaborate more as opposed to thinking of everybody being an enemy. And I think that's really a rich place for all of us, as the kids will get the benefit of it.
Well, speaking of dealing with, from a business perspective, let me ask you, Cindy, I mean, all these people out there might say, okay, I want to go and look for an online course for my students, but there are so many vendors. There are state-sponsored virtual schools in some states, but there are also private vendors, for-profit, nonprofit. How do you evaluate an online course if you're a school district and decide, okay, this one is right for my students or this one's not?
Sure. And you're right, there are lots of options, and developing your own can be quite expensive. So in looking at options that are out there, I think looking at the total program, we value communication options. I mean, is there the online instructor that's there to support the student as they're moving through the course? I think the variety in instructional strategies and content within the course that's looking at different learning styles, having backup resources as students would have difficulty in an area, that we can easily release additional resources for that student to preview. There are lots of tools within an online environment that allow that customization for a student.
Well, let me ask you, Mark. I mean, you use a one-to-one laptop program with almost all your students. How does that allow teachers to differentiate learning for each of the students? Because I know you've had great success with your test scores. They've gone up significantly.
We have, and we're extremely excited. And as we see the connectivity between the relevance of students using tools and really collaborating in significant ways, building a culture that is aligned with 21st century experience, there's a powerful driver. We have gone we're in our 4th year of our one-to-one. Our graduation rate's gone from 64% to 91%, to second in the state. Our overall composite, we have gone from 68% to 88%, third in the state. We've seen gains in every content area and at every grade level. But I think a real key is the expansive array of tools and resources that are embedded in content. The functionalities that students have a chance to go deeper, wider. There's opportunities to do both the drill and practice and then align it with this exploration, this sense of discovery. So I really think that as we're seeing content evolve, we are going to see just turbocharging the classroom with a level of excitement, energy. Our students love it. Our teachers, we use a learning management system, Angel, which is a Blackboard product. It has become a hub of collaboration. And I had a teacher who told me not long ago, she's in her 32nd year, and she said, I never thought I would give my filing cabinet away. I guarded that cabinet. It was my prized possession. If anybody got near it, I'd pick up a stick. Well, our teachers have given them, not only have they given the filing cabinet away to their colleagues, they have pushed that filing cabinet out to the world. And they're saying, let's share all of that information. Let's maximize what we're doing. So I do think that there's an embedded sense of expectation to use those tools to collaborate teacher to teacher, student to student, school to school, district to district, and there's a real power. So I think that as we're seeing content every day when I'm out in schools, a student will say, well, take a look at this. I was in a 3rd grade class, and we just started the one-to-one there this week, and we were using it's a drill with gaming effect with some personalized elements. And I was talking to this little 3rd grade boy. He said, I just love this stuff. He said, this is the best stuff. Now, for him in that classroom to be that excited, the teacher told me I was leaving. She said, this guy has gotten so excited that he is pushing himself constantly. So I think there's a lot of elements there that have great potential for all of us.
That's great. Well, you know, one of the things that you have to do when you have e-learning is you have to get the teachers on board. It's not going to work if the teachers aren't supportive of it, they don't understand it, all of that. And so, Lee, I would ask you, what do you do in a district like yours where you have a lot of teachers, and some of them are probably extremely talented, high flyers, they're really into technology and they love incorporating it. You have a group in the middle that maybe doesn't feel as comfortable but is willing to take a look, and then you have a group that maybe doesn't feel as comfortable with it. How do you get all of those people on board and sort of going in the same direction?
I think I'm going to move to Morris Head, North Carolina soon, just in case you need a second there. But I think that's really the big challenge, you know, how to get a talented workforce with a number of years of instructional leadership or teaching or even administrative leadership to bend the curve so that they get onto this next platform. And so you do have some, you go into some of our classrooms where they're, you know, the whiteboards are there. There are some teachers actively using it and able to work both live with a student and work with this technology. And others who seem to be hampered by the ability to make that transition, the multitasking that has to go on for 40, 45 minutes on an ongoing basis is really not something that we all just kind of naturally learn. You have to be born into it, or maybe just say that technology is the way we're going to do it. So we're doing a lot of professional development with teachers, but I also think we have to do a lot of retraining. And you know, there's always this. I mentioned in my opening remarks, there's this trade-off about, you know, do you buy a laptop or a textbook? Do you buy a textbook or a teacher? And we've got to stop that trade-off and say, what's the most effective way to reach this group of students? We've got in this city about 100 schools that we call empowerment schools, schools that generally, if not failing, are struggling. So that's a lot of children to have to affect, and you can't do it with the 1 on 25, 1 on 30 method anymore. You know, in order to really get them up the curve, we're going to have to leverage technology and get teachers to adopt this in a meaningful way. So I think it's inevitable, but the adoption rate is what we have to try to accelerate right now. Get more of them to say, you know, this isn't taking my job away. This is actually helping me become a better and stronger professional.
Michelle, if I can jump in.
Sure.
You know, one of the, I think, a comprehensive strategy to build capacity is an essential element of moving to one-to-one or a digital environment. We spent a lot of early time planning the professional development, differentiated by content area, by grade level, and really connecting, spending a lot of time building that capacity, that expectation, tying into our strategic plan, tying it into evaluation, and being crystal clear about this is not optional. You know, a few years ago when we would buy textbooks and we said this is the new adoption, it really wasn't optional, you know, even though it was situational. But I believe that setting clear expectations and then really focusing resource and energy on building capacity. We've also done a lot of work on building teacher leadership capacity. We've used Linda Lambert's work in particular, Carol Ann Tomlinson's work related to differentiation. And one of the things we've gotten really excited about, we have so many leaders in our schools. Now, we're just under 6,000 students, but at every grade level, at every content area, we have a variety of teacher leaders who not only have embraced it, but are leading it and are challenging their colleagues to step up and grow together. So I think that teacher leadership, which I think we're really starting to see some real dividends from that effort. But we do have summer institutes in the summer. We have ongoing training. Our school board went ahead and embraced the idea of we have an early release day every other week for a half day of dedicated professional development. Our public supported it. We asked the question, would you rather have an A teacher or a C+ teacher? And if we're going to invest in the teacher capacity, we have to spend time. So that investment has paid big dividends. And I really think that a key to, we have selected senior teachers. We have a teacher at Mooresville High School, 42 years of experience from Pennsylvania. And he moved down about 10 years ago, and he said, you know, I've thought about retiring, but I'm too excited. I'm making such a difference. And I told him this, I said, you don't even think about retiring. You are a pulse. You're making it happen. So I think we have to leverage strategic resources to build capacity, and I think teachers will take it and run with it.
Great. But Cindy, let me follow up on that from your perspective, because I think a lot of people often don't realize sort of the impact that an online teacher can have and the connection that they can build with students. And I've had students say, I know my online teacher way better than I know my face-to-face teacher. Talk a little bit about the training that you give your teachers, you know, to connect with students and to be able to differentiate when they can't see whether, you know, see a student face-to-face and see on their face if they're struggling.
Sure. And I think you're right, Michelle. What I hear from our teachers is that one-on-one connection that online learning does afford a teacher to really build that relationship with the student. I know in our platform we have a number of both asynchronous and synchronous tools that the teacher can use on an ongoing basis to either support the student further or just make sure that they're progressing. Again, not seeing them every day, they do spend a lot of time communicating and making that connection with students. I do believe the assessment, the strong assessments, and I think that's something we're going to have to continue to grow and build on collectively. I say that collectively in our nation with Common Core. I think there's an opportunity for collaborative development there. But having that ongoing formative assessment to redirect students and those technology tools that allow you to see that immediately and then be able to direct them in the correct direction or with additional resources that they may need.
Great. Well, I'm going to now ask all of you another question. So get out your active expressions remote. One of the things, there's been some research out in the last couple of years that says one of the most successful methods of reaching students through e-learning is a hybrid method where you might have a virtual teacher and maybe some face-to-face support, or you're using digital content with a face-to-face teacher. So I want to ask all of you, does your district have a strategic plan for creating blended schools that mix face-to-face instruction and virtual learning? So get out your remote and press A if the answer is yes, B if it's no, or C if you're considering a plan like that. All right, hopefully everybody pressed their buttons. So we're going to close the poll in just a second, and we'll see what the results are. The majority, I mean, it's pretty close, but the majority said no. Does that surprise you at all?
It does a little bit, because I think that the advent of expanded resources and a variety of means to deliver instruction is going to happen. So it would make sense to go ahead and take advantage of some early opportunity. You know, when we think of virtual classrooms, or we think of blended, one of the things our teachers have employed that it just kind of happened, but we've had some huge success with it. Our teachers will conduct online discussions in the evening, and they'll give a set time, 8 to 8:30 or 8 to 9, and lots of times right before an exam or a test. And my wife and I have a 6th grader, and I remember last year I was sitting over at the kitchen counter, and he was laughing. And I said, "No, Luke, you're supposed to be doing your homework." He said, "Dad, I'm on with the whole class right now." He said, "Come over here." I went over and looked. He said, "Look what Thomas just said." And I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, but when I looked, 28 out of 29 students were online together, and this was a volunteer event. The teacher volunteered, the students volunteered, but there was this online discussion that was vibrant. Last year during winter, when we were out for snow, we could not take time off. We had trouble with the exam, so we had to move ahead, had no exam review. Our teachers sent out emails, said, "We're going to do exam review at home," and it was remarkable the number of students, 90% plus, were online. Even students who didn't have online access at home went to the library, went to McDonald's, and there was this sense of connectivity. So I think there's huge opportunities, both with virtual programs in Illinois, around the country, and then internal opportunities that have great potential for advantage for students and teachers.
Well, all this is great, but we all know that none of this can happen unless you have an infrastructure that supports it. And Lee, I know you're going through sort of a big facilities plan right now. Tell me how you're thinking about e-learning in terms of the facilities and the infrastructure in that plan.
So, Michelle, I think it's essential. I mentioned again in my opening remarks that educational technology for us is as vital as concrete and steel will be. We've got roughly 70,000 unfilled or unused seats or learning spaces, and that includes some annexes and some buildings that have already been closed. And in a city like Philadelphia that has a long history, it also has old buildings. A high school we just shut down, is over 100 years old. There's not much you can do with that building except to convert it into something else other than an educational space. So for us, the anything new we build or convert or rehab has got to have not only the bones for it, the wiring and the wireless nodes and all of that, and they all have that. But I think I'm not actually surprised by the result that you've got on the poll. That blending is a goal to reach, and it's more than just having the technology
Right.
and the right boxes. I think you've got to have the right mindset. Now, once you say I'm going to change the boundary lines of a catchment area, you've also got to be able to say how I'm going to transition kids from a failing school into a successful school, and what's it going to take to make sure that school, that receiving school, doesn't sag. Well, likely it will be some blended a pedagogical approach or some technology that will help get those new kids into the right frame of mind. But this is really intricate and has to be articulated well if it's going to work. So I think our facilities master plan will reshape the way the district looks for the next 10 to 15 years easily. And we don't have tons of capital, so we really have to be precise about where we invest and what we invest in. That's why I think our keynote speaker's remarks were critical, because we don't need vendors just to come out of the woodwork saying they've got the latest and greatest thing.
Right.
I need something that is sustainable, that is repeatable, but also can be scaled to fit the new needs that we have.
That's great. Great. Well, now we're going to take some time to get some questions from all of you. We have mic runners on both sides of the room, and please make sure to state your name and your affiliation when you have a question. So who's got a question? Got someone right here?
Hi, my name is Jackie Boudria, and I'm with the College of Mount St. Vincent. I'm also with St. Joseph's. I'm a doctoral candidate. My question is basically, I just got put in charge of a criminal justice program, and we use blended learning formats only for the 6 weeks at a time. And I'm a little concerned because I work only with adults in the continuing professional program, and they take one course at a time. So I'm concerned about what's the best way to present their courses to them, because I see them for 3 hours one night, and then the format for the online is through Blackboard only. And I'm very concerned that with the limited time I have in the classroom, that they will not be learning the material appropriately if I just put up the material and have them, go and get it, because they are only seeing me one night a week.
Well, this sounds like an opportunity to talk about extending sort of school beyond the time when you're in sort of a online or face-to-face situation. Who wants to tackle that?
Oh boy.
I'll give it a stab. I think that as we see the evolutional opportunities for students, whether they're young students in primary grades or adult students, we have a couple of doctoral cohorts going on in Mooresville, master's cohorts, and a lot of independent courses with universities, both online and in-seat programs. And I think that looking at a variety of opportunities, but again, with the collaboration functionality with that Blackboard and other learning management systems offer, there's opportunities to engage multiple students at one time, to have them work in a collaborative fashion, and really a sense of group effort work, project-based opportunities. So I think there's a lot of ways to do that. And one of the advents that we're seeing in Mooresville that we think really has a major connect with students seeing what they're doing in school translating to their future is that there's a lot of collaboration. They're building projects. We had a visitor recently, and he asked a group of kids that were working, and he said, how did you become the leader? And she said, well, because I was the first to speak. And I said, we should do this, and they had assigned themselves different roles. There was a project leader, there was a research, there was somebody who was building it, somebody who was doing embedded video and art. But the students were putting together something that they felt had value, not just for that class and that grade, but for their future. So there's opportunities there that I think have huge potential for students to get energized about their experience in schools.
Great. Who else has a question? Got one over there.
Good morning. My name is Greg Manfrey, principal of Drexel Hill Middle School in Upper Darby School District, just west of Philadelphia. As a middle school principal, I think one of the most critical pieces that we have as teachers and administrators is really trying to put our hands and our minds around the whole child and making sure that we educate the whole child. And what I mean by that specifically in this forum is the socialization piece amongst the students. And my concern is that there's just too much, not enough face-to-face interaction amongst our students, and that would be a concern for me with this technology piece. And I was wondering how you would address that. Thank you.
Cindy, why don't you, we'll start with Cindy and go to Lee.
I guess how I would respond to that in thinking about the topic of blended learning, for me, it really is getting to that individual student, that by having the opportunity for face-to-face and online experiences, you're really meeting more closely the needs of that student, where that student is, gearing teacher time to focus more on that individual interaction with the student. I guess that's how I would see in blended learning that it does give that student-centered personal learning plan in combining both.
You know, I think about the question that was asked before and this gentleman's question, because this is really where you can't replace human interaction, emotional intelligence, the ability to relate to somebody and to find out in front of all the technology put up where that person is on their learning curve. So I agree that, you know, for us, with schools that have challenges in terms of school climate, bullying, and violence, and we're trying to address all of that by putting all the right people in place, you still have to have a need for understanding of how that individual is going to relate in that environment on that day. Because some of these kids are coming from circumstances that are incredibly challenging, homes that are broken, etc. So the technology is terrific because it does, as Cindy's saying, give you an ability to tailor your approach, but it won't replace. That's why I think blending is the right way to go, because it won't replace that human interaction, that ability to guide somebody and find out how they tick and why they are the way they are. I don't ever want to see us go just completely to turn, flip the switch and it's all you. I don't think that will ever be the complete way to educate children.
Now, Michelle, I want to address that specifically because I think it's a great question, but I'll have to tell you, we've seen the exact opposite. In fact, we've seen a tremendous increase in student-to-student interaction. We're using collaboration. We don't buy desks anymore. We buy tables because students work at tables. They share they talk while they're working, and then the teacher, rather than a talking head and didactic approaches, is very much involved in what we call teaching from the middle and engaging students both in group, personal, and doing a lot of what I call facilitating teaching beside the student. And one of the things we've embedded is a lot of structure and framework on building the capacity of students to interact, which they have not had previously. We've used a couple of programs, one called Capturing Kids' Hearts, which is really about building a foundation of relationships in the classroom and not just saying it, but talking about it, investing some of the first couple of weeks. We spend a lot of time investing in how we treat each other, how we
this was all aside from the technology.
But I do believe that there's great potential to build the capacity for students to work together, to talk, and for the teacher, where there is an even more personalized approach. And one of the things that we have found out that students that would never raise their hand in whole group instruction, in a small group, they will send a message to the teacher and say, I wanted to ask this. So I think there's potential to build a better culture collaboration. But I would say this, our key to success has not been a piece of hardware or software. It has been teachers. The teachers' intentional use of leveraging that resource to take the environment and the opportunities for students to the next level.
That's great. I think we have a question right here.
We'd want to get in. Okay, this one comes from Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. And he asks, what research can you point to that reflects the effects of e-learning on K through 12 learners? All that I'm aware of is stuff about adult-oriented research.
Well, I think you can just talk about, the effect you've seen in your district and the test scores that you've seen go.
Well, I would mention the Project Red research, which was self-reporting, but it was 1,000 school, the impact of technology on achievement and cost efficiency. So that report came out last April. There's another dissemination of that. But we have about 8 or 10 doctoral research projects going on in Mooresville right now, one from Harvard, one from the University of Florida, several from North Carolina universities. And I think that many times we use an excuse of saying, well, we don't have the hard data to move forward. All we have to do is walk into any work environment in the world and say, what are they using? What are they doing? How do they interact to know that there's some pretty hard data? We need to get aligned with the future. And I think there's a moral imperative. So I think that there's a growing body of research. And certainly we are seeing in Mooresville, and we've had a lot of interest, there's a lot of indicators that there's a direct correlation between embedded data, the efficiency with intervention, the personalized instruction, the relevance factor, and the connectivity to students and teachers solving problems that will lead to advanced student achievement. We have seen an increase in 25% in our free and reduced population in the last 4 years. It's 42%. And at the same time, we've seen all of our performance data go straight up. So now, is that empirical data? No. Is it a strong indicator? Yes. And I think that we can look at the previous when we were talking about the popcorn popping. It's popping everywhere, and I think it's popping faster. And I think that as we see that happening, we're going to see a national effort to take advantage of the resources that we have to help students.
Great. I definitely want to get to this question over here.
My name's Eric Westendorf. I was a principal for 5 years in DC, and now I'm doing an education technology startup called LearnZillion. And my question is about all the resources that are available now, and thinking about teachers managing the challenge of understanding how they fit together, and then also understanding the habits that they need to adopt in order to follow through and use these resources really intentionally.
Let me ask Lee to attack that one.
Well, I think you've hit on that's what I was referring to earlier. I mean, it's literally like just having so much. When I go into Home Depot, I have the same feeling. I could use everything here. But whether or not you know how to use it well and properly and efficiently without wasting a lot of time and energy, especially on these kids. I mean, that's the thing. We want to be able to experiment in free space, but I think it's going to be imperative, quite frankly, to embed more of the emerging technologies in graduate schools of education so that teachers learn how, or emerging teachers learn how to use the technology, and that whole idea of blending is now a skill that is more than just happening to to take a photo and flash it on the screen. But I also think it's important that emerging companies like yours or other vendors start to give us the right how-tos, the manuals. What's it like when you use your tool in a classroom? Again, I think Mr. Gunn addressed this, the whole idea of integrating it across a system. Because if we end up with 1,000 different silos, it's not good for us. It's a huge waste of time. And again, I don't have a dashboard now that tells me how all my schools are doing. And that's really what, I mean, I'm driven by this need to understand when the buses arrive, how the food is getting served, and how the classrooms are operating. Now, I won't be able to get there right away, and maybe 2 generations from now, the next superintendent will have that. But it's important for those of you who are procuring services to us, think that way. How will you be able to connect the dots so that we'll be able to get teachers feeling that they don't have to be overwhelmed? They shouldn't have to do anything more, quite frankly, than flip on the switch and go to their craft. If it's more difficult than that, then I think, and I want them to learn all the, where to put serial ports and all of that, but that's not what they're supposed to be doing. We should make it really easy, I think. The access point should be easier for them to reach. So I think if you're designing your goods and services along that way, then I think we can really make some progress. It's a great question.
Great. We're going to have to end the discussion there. And I feel like lots of people could ask many more questions, but we're going to a networking break. And I know that our panelists are going to stick around for at least a little bit of time. So feel free to approach them. And if you didn't get to ask a question, this is the time to do it. So thank you again to our 3 panelists who brought a great amount of information to us. Thank you.